four must-haves also to build a coaching culture is what we focus on. So what are these first four must-haves is what we are looking at is that, having a tool that measures and matters, which can look at the impact of coaching and leadership and has a high reliability. And that's an important part, which means if we, in absence of a reliable tool, we can use anything. And there is a huge tendency in this business and industry to dwell on psychometrics. Psychometrics, while are good in getting us an individual profile, however, they do not provide us a data which is broad based, where we can look at a group of people and find out the characteristics of a high performing or a high coaching culture. And that's one of the challenges which exist in the market today. It should be simple and adaptable process, which means anything which is complex and has to be basically tailor-made for every organization limits the scalability and relevance to the organization. World does not have time today. We need to move fast, and we need to be able to use tools which can throw reliable data and help us aid in our journey so that we can focus on velocity to create a coaching culture. Third, it should help us. It's important to, when we talk about building a coaching culture, it's important to build a leadership belief system, which basically helps direct reports to perform at a higher level. So if your leaders believe that, we are not hiring high performers, then there might be a belief in the minds of the leaders or the managers that, there are some people in this world who cannot perform at the next level. So anything when we are trying to build a coaching culture, the training team, HR teams, practitioner teams, consultant teams, it's imperative that we help develop this and nurture this mindset that everyone can perform at the next level and everyone is coachable. In my interaction with the coaches in India and worldwide, we often hear a situation where people say, there are some people whom we can't coach. Now that's a mindset that I have concern with, because it assumes that people cannot improve. They cannot have a better version of who they are right now. And that's a very self-limiting bias or a self-limiting belief of the coach or the people who are coaching, whether it's a leadership or a manager or a coach himself. So one has to really look into that. And therefore, to create a coaching culture or environment or a climate, that belief needs to be fostered effectively. And last is availability and deployment of limited resources for developing people, and also has to be cost effective. Every organization has limited availability of resources. You don't have, millions of dollars available for very few people. While we can do that, but we live in a world which is thrifty nowadays. So those limited resources must give us a maximum return on effort or maximum return on investment as we go forward. So these four are the building blocks or four essentials of coaching culture. Okay, and as we go forward, we'll dwell on each one and talk a little more about it. But before that, I will again like to bring in Giles and ask him to share his perspective. And go ahead, and any one of you have any questions, and I will request Riddhi to scan the chat box for the questions, and we'll take it up, in the process.
Well, I think without taking each one individually, clearly when measuring the right things is important, and that's been sort of our contention at PMC, is that organizations tend to measure only skills, but there's other aspects of coaching which are equally important when it comes to being effective in establishing a coaching culture. Things like credibility, and I know you're going to talk about this a little bit later, credibility and motivation, and having those limited resources, invested in the right places. Those are all important areas that need to be measured to ensure that the coaching culture has the proper environment to be embedded and eventually be sustainable over time. And so getting the senior leadership is obviously clearly very important as well, about getting them to believe that coaching is the right investment, because for every dollar they invest, there's enough sufficient research out there that says the return will be over $7 for every dollar. So it makes sense for senior leadership to want to not only talk about the importance of coaching, but also take active and steps to make sure that the people in the organization are able to see the senior manager's commitment to coaching through not only dollars and words, but also in actions.
Thanks, guys, for a great ad. Okay. Any questions? Riddhi, I'm going to unmute you and let me know if there are any questions from the group which we can talk about or address.
So Pooja has a question. Taking the point of everyone is coaching or not, there is always a lot of debate. I have come across few people who are just not open to coaching. Is there any other mode which you can think which can be applied to this? Okay, that's a great question, Pooja. Thanks for raising that. Okay, so it is a debate, and that's a great point. That whether everyone is coachable or not. So let me give a different view, and I'm going to request Giles also to come in with his vast experience in this domain. When we ask the question, everyone is coachable, the question assumes that coach is ready, but somebody else, the person to be coached, maybe the follower or the direct report, he or she is not coachable. So that's a big assumption in that particular question. And normally when manager says, I've got a member in my team who's not coachable or who cannot perform at the next level, it also indicates to the limitation or the belief of the manager or the coach, which he or she has about the person. And in fact, therefore, instead of getting into the debate whether everyone is coachable or not, it's a better idea to say, are people willing to acknowledge that they can perform at the next level? And coaching is a means or a method, one of the means and a method to go there. And how can we achieve that? Giles, would you like to comment on this point?
Well, you're right. It is a debate. I think the word coachable, by itself means that taking somebody from point A and bringing them to point B. But obviously, the person has to have the motivation to want to improve. And so the question is, what would make them want to improve? Sometimes it's someone's opinion, especially if it's a manager. A bottom-up perspective of who they are and how they operate might be sufficient to motivate them to want to improve. If it's an individual contributor, sometimes it's a coworker that can help them realize that there's some deficiencies here. So it's finding the right source of information that will allow that individual to be motivated. It's difficult to motivate someone else. It's got to come from within. And so the information that they receive, either from a coworker or from someone else, it could be someone else in the organization, it could be a counselor, might be sufficient for them to be motivated to want to improve, then ultimately be coachable. A lot of it has to do with where they get their information from, and is it a respectful source, and if it's someone that they have a high regard for who suggests them to make a change, then that might be sufficient. Sometimes it's circumstances that will motivate them to want to change or to want to become more coachable. So it's about where the information comes from and how it's presented to allow people to be motivated to want to improve or be coachable.